Welcome to Leadership Rewired. Our mission is to disrupt traditional leadership development by fostering a community of resilient, growth-minded individuals who drive their own destinies and lead effectively through change without sacrificing their well-being. Two former colleagues and current friends, Allison Allen and Dean Martin, invite you to join them for an honest conversation that brings a personal perspective to the issues of leadership.
Hey leaders, welcome to Leadership Rewired podcast. Dean and I are diving into a much needed topic, which is really around modeling healthy leadership. We're going to talk about why it's important, how it impacts your team, how you can practice certain things around doing it. So let's just get to it.
Yeah.
Dean?
Yeah, I think there's often been, I think there's an unspoken belief that for a leader to be considered a good leader or a good manager, that they are just grinding, they're nonstop, they're hardworking. You know, I'm thinking about the first time I ever even had a job. I mean, my background is early 100 years ago, working in teaching, but you know, your head teacher had to be working super hard. And then I worked in a call center. Even then, the managers were the ones that put in the extra hours, and you know, through consultancy and then working through various corporate environments with leadership. It's just like, surely a good leader is somebody who's just slamming it every day, working exceptionally hard.
Yeah, I mean, we're actually taught that. We're actually taught that leadership means giving 110% all the time.
Yeah.
Like all the time. But what we're not taught is that in that process, how to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And if you're not taking care of yourself, how can you effectively take care of the people that you lead?
Yeah.
And make sure that you're looking out for them. You have to have the energy to pour into people. It's like, for example, you know, imagine pouring water into a cup and it just keeps running over and spilling over. You know, that practice is spilling over into your team because your team is literally watching the move you make. Remember this around team members look at the leader first.
Yeah.
Decision come from senior leaders, but they're looking at you and how you are reacting, how you're showing up.
Yeah. And we want a really good impact on people. So you could be a wonderful leader with exceptional vision, and you're very good at training people, and you develop them, and you're clear at giving feedback, and you're doing like beautiful stuff. You're doing active listening like we spoke about last week, like lovely stuff. And yet there may also be some ways in which you be behaving or acting as a leader that doesn't necessarily model healthy leadership. And by that we mean, like, are you getting enough sleep and enough, you know, sustenance to be able to look after your body? Are you working all the hours, or are you able to go home at the end of the day? Or do you have a boundary around not working over the weekends? That sort of stuff. We want healthy leadership. So you could be doing great stuff as a leader and then also still sending a message to your team, whether you mean to or not, around, I'm going to email you back at 11 p.m. and I'll be working on the weekend. And maybe, does that mean I expect you to do that too? I think that's that worry, isn't it? About like, what's the message we're sending to our teams, if that's how we prefer to work or are working?
Well, I don't even know that we are aware that we're sending a message. If we think about why leaders don't think that self-care is for them. Yeah. Right. A lot of it has to do with the culture that a lot of us are dropped into, which is really about strength and being a hero, right? Of the moment, for the work of your team, of the organization. And people really believe that, a lot of people really believe that, you know, taking time off makes them vulnerable. That they appear to be weak. You know, and so if you think about that for a second, if you're dropped into a culture where that is actually happening, or you're coming from a culture and now you're in a new culture, but you brought that with you, you think to yourself, taking time off and not being constantly available and not grinding is actually a demonstration of weakness. and it makes you vulnerable when you feel weak.
Yeah.
So, but let me take a different turn or a different reaction to that. Yeah. I'm going to say you not taking time off for yourself and for your team is kind of selfish. I just want you to sit with that for a second. Well, selfish in the sense that you're driving, but again, you're not necessarily thinking about the people around you. Yeah. What's going on for them? Yeah. What do they got going on at home? What are the sort of priorities that are constantly, competing with the work that's going on? Yeah. Do they think this is how they get ahead? Yeah. Do they think this is the way that they get noticed or make, extra money or get promoted? Yeah. So in some respects, centering yourself in that sort of hero strength, I can do all things. Yeah. You're demonstrating that this is the way that things get done here. Yeah. Instead of actually, again, taking care of yourself. And honestly, that wears a toll on you over time. Yeah. I mean,
well, I want to, can we look at the leader first before, of course, we're thinking about the impact on the team. This is why we're saying why your team needs to see you taking care of yourself. But let's look at the leader first of all, this kind of person who's maybe fairly consistently working exceptionally late or responding to emails throughout the weekend or reluctant to take vacation or just that kind of sentiment of I'll just work as much as I can. Mm-hmm. I want to ask why there may be some leaders who are listening are like, bloody hell, Dean and Allison, what other option do I have? I've got such a huge amount of work. This is the only time I can do it. Of course I have to work in my evenings and on Sundays. I don't want to. If I don't do it, I'm going to be in trouble.
Are you asking me, or are you?
Well, I'm exclaiming. I'm channeling them on their behalf. What do we say to those folks?
Well, we have talked about in other podcasts, and actually, I'm sure in any organization that you're working for, what are you hearing? You're responsible for getting the best out of people. You're responsible for getting work. You're responsible for retaining, the best talent on your team. You're responsible for making sure that their engagement is high and for motivation. You're responsible for those things. So if we just take what you just said, which is I have a lot of work and I have a lot of responsibility and a lot of things that I have to get done, how am I going to make time to take care of myself? Well, you're also responsible for those things that I just named. One thing that I would really suggest is that you look at all the work that you have on your plate. Yeah. And we've talked about in one of our other podcasts, you can delegate some of the work that's sitting on your plate to other people. Yeah. On your team. What does that do? That engages them, that gets them excited, that develops them in ways that they want to develop. What does that also do? Frees you up. Mm-hmm. Frees you up to lift your head up and see what's going on. Yeah. So I hear your point around some leaders going to be saying that, but they have these other responsibilities. Your responsibilities are not just the deliverable. The responsibilities are all those other things, which are all associated with your team and taking care of them. So you have to be in a healthy mindset in order to be able to do all of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's lovely. I like that. So that's for leaders who maybe are dissatisfied with their current situation, that they don't want to work on weekends any more than anyone else does. There may also be something, I think, Allison, tell me if this makes sense, of some leaders who are reluctant to model the self-care just because maybe they feel like they just don't need it. Maybe they are the kind of person that says, I love this. I don't mind working on a Sunday. There's something within me that's driving me. And if I don't do it, then who the hell else is going to? Or actually, I don't want to delegate some of this stuff because this is my favorite piece of work, or I'm reluctant to hand this over, whatever. I like this stuff. Why must I? I'm fine. What's the big deal?
I guess I'm struggling with your question because can you just go like what's your finer point on that? What's your, is it that they love working hard
Yeah.
And so they don't want to change.
No, they don't want to change.
Yeah.
What do we say to them then? And we because we're still saying your team needs to see you take care of yourself. And they're like, but I'm fine. I'm not having a friggin' nervous breakdown. I'm happy to stay online till midnight.
I think that there are lots of leaders who love working hard and love working long hours and love pushing themselves to the brink. Yeah. I think there are bunches of people who do that. Yeah. The question is then does that mean you don't care what you're modeling for your team?
Nice.
Because what if they actually do care about the fact that they're having to work countless hours and, or feel that that's the only way that you'll invest in them. So, so I think there's something, what comes up for me and what you're saying is, the lead by example is actually real, right? Your team members, your directs, or the team if you have a big organization, they are looking at you and how you show up and the things that you do. And they are going to be thinking, especially those ones that are like wanting the promotion or wanting a bigger job, they're going to be thinking, okay, that's how I do it. Yeah. But you know what? They may not do it as flawlessly as you. Yeah. If you're really good at it and you love working all the time, they may not actually do it as flawlessly as you. And so therefore, when they do what you do, it may cause performance problems. It may cause issues for them. And in fact, you're not even saying to them, I want you to work like I do. No. But in essence, you are, because they're watching you do it. So I hear your point around, I love working this way. You still, as a leader, have to take responsibility for the message that you're sending to your broader team.
Yeah. I like that. I think what we've done here is kind of tackled both angles of whether you like it or not. Mm-hmm. Working in a sustained way, in a consistent way, that is like you're not taking vacation or you responding all the time or your weekends or whatever, that will have a negative impact on your people. And we're saying, look after them and model it, whether you liking it or not. Peaks and troughs in a work. Yeah, I understand there may be some times where it's all hands on deck and a lot of people are working late. We're not talking about that. But if you're doing it consistently, it's like, this is going to hurt your peeps. It's going to damage them. And we want you to lead by example. So how do you do that now? That is your responsibility.
But I want to respond to damage and hurt, because I think that's a little bit too strong. I think when I think about leaders, and I've been one of those leaders who just loves working all the time, I think there is what's going on for me that makes me feel that I need to spend the energy and time on a body of work. And is it a deadline? Is it a deliverable? Is it I feel that I'll get promoted if I do this work? So whatever your motivators are, they're legit. And again, I don't think the intention is to hurt people, but I just think the thing that we're trying to flag is the way in which you show up might promote something that another person on your team can't physically do.
Yes.
Or they can, and yet you may not be ready to give them the recognition that they think they deserve on the back of doing something like that. So your demonstration and the way in which you show up across all things, not just even this topic, is really about what you want to promote, what you want people to think about. So the reason why I think this topic is also really important is that you taking a moment to go on vacation, you taking a moment to grab a coffee, you taking a moment to, stand in the middle of the floor and talk about donuts. We bring those up often on the podcast. You taking a moment to that demonstrates balance and promotes healthy work environment, healthy leadership. Again, if you're one of these people who wants to work until midnight for a week or every other day, that's your call. But also promote healthy things like taking vacation, using your PTO, taking advantage of your benefits, having a coffee with a peer and a colleague.
Yeah.
These are things that just make work environments less tense.
Yes.
And more positive for the people who work in them.
Yeah. Because, also the message that is sent around somebody who might be comfortable working weekends, let's say, is that everybody should be comfortable working weekends. And there are some folk who, we shouldn't have to work weekends at all.
That's
and
right.
there may be some who look at this leader, and maybe because of their circumstances, it's okay for that leader to work on the weekend. Maybe their kids are grown up, or maybe they're single, or maybe they have a different kind of, their life allows for that. And then there's somebody going, I've just had my third baby and I'm caring for this and I've got this. I can't do it. It almost feels unfair. Like I would work on the weekend if I could. Am I now going to be penalized? Does it look as though I'm not committed to this? Like I really don't want to work hard. And I think that would actually also generate some kind of a resentment of, well, you're lucky you get to be able to do this. You can stay late and make this presentation look great tomorrow. I can't. I'm picking my kids up. Or I'm committed. I sing in a choir every Wednesday, and that's what I want to do. Like I want to be able to do that. And we also, that's the longer term impact of building a resentment in your people going, not like they may want to, but because of their life situation, they're like, why should I have to? And I can't. I wish I could. I can't. I have to leave at 5.
Yeah. Again, I think it's this notion of like how people are seeing you and your activity, what you prioritize around your own work ethic, and how do you bring that to the team? Yeah. Like if you're saying, hey, I expect everybody to work on the weekend, then I would hope that that person's in an environment where they can say, I cannot. Right. And here are the reasons why, versus carrying that guilt. Again, this is leadership. I would never want to promote anyone working on the weekend. I have in circumstances, I was thinking as you were speaking about when we were bringing AOL and Yahoo together and we were integrating them into one organization, and we kicked off these work streams, and we all had these very intense deliverables. And I had 2 people working with me on the organizational design for that organization. And we had a war room, and we would literally be in that war room for days and days. Like it was exhausting. And it never occurred to me that, we have this project and we're going and I'm there, I'm not getting home to get to my kids. And one of the folks scheduled a vacation. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I'm so glad they did that. I'm so glad that they scheduled a vacation to take a break from this chaos. Yeah. And they were all heightened about, all the things they were going to be leaving us to do, the other 2, myself and this other person. But they scheduled a vacation, and I so appreciated them doing that. And I'm thinking to myself, like, why didn't I schedule a vacation? Yeah. Why didn't, and the other person had, okay, we can schedule a vacation. And so some of this, comes from your team modeling the behavior that they want to see, which is like they need a vacation, they need a break, they need to get out of the war room because it's just not where they want to be. So I just think it's this notion around what's the environment you want to promote? What do you want? Sometimes your team, and I know we've been using the promotion and the comp and all these other things, sometimes your team will work the long hours because you are. Because they want to win just like you do. They love working with you and for you. They learn so much from you, but they will work the hours right there with you. And you can look across the table and they're exhausted. You can see it on their face, but they're putting it in every single day. And then you get this wake up call where somebody takes a vacation and you're like, oh my God, I'm so glad they took a vacation. Why didn't I tell them to take a vacation? So again, it's just, what is the productive work environment, whether you're remote or sitting in an office together, that you want to promote to your people? Yeah. And how in that do you take care of yourself? Yeah. I remember being physically exhausted. Not that I just didn't see my kids, mentally and physically exhausted every single day. Yeah. Working on the weekends for weeks on end. It was not healthy, but yet I had a team that was right there with me. I'm not suggesting that is 365 days. Like you said earlier, sometimes the project calls for it, right?
Sure.
But me being the leader that I am, I wasn't mad because they took a vacation or, pissed off because it was going to cause me extra work. I was actually happy because I know they needed a break. And I think that's what we're talking about on Leadership Rewired. It's like that adaptive leadership. Look around and see what's going on. Look what you are saying in your actions to your team.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, you need a break.
Yeah.
I don't care how good you are and how much you love to work all the time. You need a break. Yeah. You need a break from the chaos and the grind to be with you, to be with yourself, to be with your family, to be with your dog, whatever makes sense.
Yeah.
Does that?
Yeah. Well, I would like us to be able to normalize the fact that you don't even have to be working hard and having like a crazy, crazy time.
Yeah.
To what's the word for it? To justify the fact that you also then next week need to leave at 5. Yeah. I think we should be able to fit our amount of work into a working day.
Yes.
That is it. That should be the norm. And then you still take your vacation and you can still walk around the office and have a cup of coffee and chat to somebody and whatever. Nobody's taking the piss. They're not trying to get out of work, but that should be our normal way of how we're operating. And then we are still allowed to have a vacation, and we're still allowed to say, hey, I went to the doctor at 3 and I only finished at 4:45. And your manager say, okay, see you tomorrow. Not, well, are you going to come back online later this evening to make up for the hour and 45 minutes you missed? Like, no, you don't. We don't have to prove how hard we've worked in order to get this rest. Mm-hmm. Built into the expectation of this is how your working day and week should be.
I think I totally hear what you're saying by let's normalize leaving work at 5. But the reality of the situation is organizations are getting leaner. Cuts are happening everywhere. Doing more with less is a theme out there. And leaders have to do all the things, right? They've got to get work done. They've got to get the best out of the people. They got to retain the best talent, because if they lose the best talent, God forbid, they've got to develop people. They got to handle performance issues. They've got to do all of these things. And so I would love to normalize 9 to 5, but I think what's happened in the world is that, organizations are making very tough decisions and leaders' plates are just getting fuller.
Yeah.
And so that's why I want to come back to your earlier point. Like, I think there are people who love working all the time. But I think even those people are stressed in this environment.
Sure.
Because the pile-on is real. And I think what we're suggesting is look for those moments to figure out a way to create some levity in the amount of work that you're doing. And in some respects, look for those creative ways to send a different message to your team.
Yeah.
I love saying, not all things are a priority, even if we're being told they are.
Yeah.
So, sometimes working with your manager to say, okay, I've got these 15 things very directly on my list that you want me to do. What are the top 5 things I need to get done? Because I have people that I need to get this work done, and they are burnt out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, sometimes when you say that to your senior leaders, my people are burnt out, the first thing they start thinking about is your top performers that they don't want to leave. Mm-hmm. That top engineer who they don't want to lose. So you just have to figure out a way to manage it all. I'm not for a second pretending that today's world is just so easy and you can just do that. Yeah. Not at all.
Well,
go ahead.
I think we're hearing that there are opportunities here to sort of refine or to tweak how we are modeling this self-care.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be, again, I'm really against sort of binary thinking in any space, but it doesn't have to be, well, now, I used to work all hours in the world and now I'm leaving at 5 every day. But where are the opportunities to look for that and to be explicit in what you're saying to your people and to also model this good self-care? So I think being explicit is one of the ways in which you might be able to, as a leader, say to people, hey, we've been working on this project for 2 weeks and I know we've probably been doing late hours or whatever. This is not the norm. or this is not something I'm expecting. Whatever your message is, we're doing it because this is a tight deadline for October or whatever the case may be. Or, if it is an exception, hey, you're going to see that I will have responded to what you've sent me on Friday. I'm probably going to work on it on Sunday. That works for me. I'm not expecting you to respond. It's because I know that's going to give me some quiet time. And on Monday, I've got it, So that's why I'm doing it on Sunday. So you're actually showing your people, hey, this is why you're going to see me work in this way, or this is the exception to the rule as to why I'm asking you to work in this way. So that's one way in which we can do that.
I love that. Some others to consider was just to my earlier point. As a manager, you should put time on your calendar to make sure that you and your team are working on the most important things. I can't stress that enough. So prioritization, put 15 to 30 minutes on your calendar to just look across your book of business, talk to your leader and say, are we working on the most important things? The most important things. And then mobilize your people around the most important things. Because where this extra work comes to play outside of those sort of special projects or those intense moments where you're working on some kind of merger and acquisition, is when people are working on things that they think are important. And they're not necessarily important right now. The other thing I would just suggest, and I stress this enough, and I know some of you guys are going to say, I can't do that. But it's like, you have back-to-back meetings. Most of us do. I just remember my calendar just being, all different colors. Build in, breaks between meetings to give yourself time to transition. Even if it's 5 or 10 minutes, build in 5 or 10 minutes to transition because our mind needs time to switch to the next topic. And sometimes these topics are not necessarily, a flow of the same conversation. So you as a leader, you need to build in those breaks. And sometimes when you build in those breaks and you get to your next meeting, you show up with all the answers and there isn't any reason why somebody needs to work late or do something extra because we've got to do more research or let's stay and let's work on that. Often leaders will, be in a meeting. They're now finally figuring out what the issue is. And by the time that they actually figure out what the issue is, no answer has come of it. And they're like, oh, let's spend another 30 minutes or let's meet at 5 and talk about this. Give yourself some time in between those meetings to transition and really think about what that next meeting is about. 5 or 10 minutes. And then I don't know how to suggest this in a way that people will hear. I'm just going to say it, build in a coffee with your top performers. And I'm just talking about like a 15-minute or 30-minute coffee with at least, a top performer or 2 top performers during the week. Takes you off the work grind, gives you a chance to connect with that top performer over coffee, check in with them to see where they are. What happens there? You now have engaged your top performers. You're taking a break because it's coffee. And that can end up being some kind of, if you want a topic, make it a state, how are you doing with your career? Are you getting everything out of it? You don't even have to talk about work. You can talk about anything, right? Yes. So build in 1 or 2 top performer 30-minute chats that could be really, really interesting. We said this earlier. I'm going to keep beating this drum. Delegation is not about offloading work. It's really about using something on your desk. And we have a whole podcast on this, using something on your desk to give to somebody you want to develop, somebody who reports to you that wants to develop in a different way. And it's about giving them work to do. It's about important tasks, about building their confidence and giving them an opportunity to use skill sets that they haven't necessarily leveraged in before. And what that does is frees you up to work on the most impactful work on your desk and allow you some time to take care of yourself. Dean, would you add anything to those?
Those were lovely. I want to add one, which I think may sometimes show up where a leader it's almost a little bit like micromanagement. There's a reluctance in a leader to almost take the foot off the brake, off the accelerator, like just want to drive people all the time instead of just saying, like that example of, you went to the doctor and like, sure, log off this evening. Fine. And that person may even say, oh, I'll come back online. I'll do 2 hours this evening. No, you don't have to. But I sometimes see some leaders doing that. I've got to keep them going. I've got to keep them working. And I think that may be a symptom of a deeper problem, which is one of, I don't feel like I have the influence over my team. They're not doing what I need them to do.
Okay.
And so therefore, it's almost like a presenteeism. Let's just make sure they are always online, or just make sure nobody's slacking. And, there's almost like a frantic feeling within them of, I just got to keep the pressure on, whether there's useful work to be doing or not. And rather than being able to say, hey, there's a time and a place where actually on a Friday I can say, hey, it's 4:00. Let's log off, folks. Or please no work on the weekend because, we've just finally finished whatever, to allow those natural tides of, that ebb and flow of heavy work. But actually, if as a leader, you're concerned about my people aren't doing what I need them to do, I need them to always be on and working hard or present, or I need to see that green light, or I need to see them in the office and who left early, that is actually telling me something else, which is, how are you leading? Are they clear on what the priorities are?
Mm-hmm.
Are they clear on how you've delegated or what they're responsible for? Do they have the resources? Are you giving them the feedback? Are you doing the good active listening and making sure you're understanding what's going on for them? There are many other sort of levers or things we should be reaching for in order to solve a problem, rather than this one only comes in at 9:10 every morning and I need them to be working harder, and also she leaves early, or like, what is that panic about? That's about something else.
Yeah. And I mean, luckily there's a whole podcast on micromanagement, but I want to come to something you said, which is what's driving me to need my team to be working like I work is what I took from what you said.
Yeah.
And to your point around the micromanagement, like I would even say something like that feels even not about micromanagement. That feels like something else. What is going on for you that you need your team to model actually working all the time? I mean, to your point around Slack and the green light and just, being able to make sure that everybody's working as hard as you are. I think there is something deeper there. And for me, I think it would be really, really important to figure out why you need that. Why, as a leader, do you need that compliance? Because that's what I heard in that.
Yeah, it is compliance.
There's some compliance around, and you hear this a lot with leaders who manage remote teams. There's a little bit of, and I'm not a psychologist, but there's a little bit of oh, I don't see the green light, they must not be working. Yeah. Or, I just Teams them and they're not responding. Yeah. Or, I don't see, them typing things in the active document, so they must not be working. And so everything goes to, they must not be working.
Yeah.
And this is where, and I think we should think about this. It doesn't this isn't solving your desire to make sure everybody's working as hard as you are. So I think we maybe need to dig deep into that. But there is something that sort of says, if you start to assign works around deliverables and people meet the deliverables, then you don't necessarily need to monitor everything that they're doing.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. I think the culture shift here is managers need to get better at assigning deliverables and work.
Yes.
And whether people get in at 9 or 9:15 or 9:10, I think is what you said, it doesn't matter. I'm looking at, do they meet the deliverables and the deadlines on the project that we're working on? And if the answer to that is yes, I'm good. Yeah. And one of the things I loved, and this was years, but I loved for working with McKinsey, was that we had very good, healthy projects. And I say healthy because I wasn't like, oh, I can knock this out in 5 minutes and I can take the rest of the week off. Like, no, I had work like for the entire, every day, every week. We had project meetings, project deadlines, but no one was like sitting there checking to see if we got into work at 8 or we left at 6 or we got there at 9 and left at 5. Like nobody was checking that. Yeah. What was checked is if you missed a deadline, you needed to explain why, and you had to identify when you were going to get it done, and you needed to get it done. Like that was what was expected, and that was in the 90s, right? I mean, that's how it was being managed. It was the most freeing way of working. I felt such accountability and responsibility for my work, because I knew that my work was directly connected to somebody else's work. And if I didn't get it done, like so, maybe it's not so much about like, is the green light on, as it is at making sure that when you're assigning work, you're assigning a healthy amount of work for people to do. Yeah. Giving the feedback, having your one-on-ones to check in. So you're not surprised at a project review, and make sure that you're looking at the outcome of the work versus the hours. You might remember when we were at Bloomberg. Yeah. I mean, remember, I don't know if you remember when we were at Bloomberg, and I use so many Bloomberg examples, but I remember when we joined Bloomberg, Bloomberg was very much like, I need to see you culture, sitting in that chair. And, and I remember working with the tech group, and we were introducing work from home, and the struggle for that was so real. And coming out of McKinsey and all the places I've worked, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, what's this going to take? And so, it's a cultural thing. And I think that part of recognizing shifts in culture is recognizing, that you need to retain people and that people have different needs. So it's not anyway, I'll jump off this, but it's not the sort of green light. It's really making sure you're giving people healthy amounts of work, and then trusting them to get it done.
Yeah.
Anything else?
That healthy amounts, the healthy amounts of work within a working week, I think that then sort of balances out. It's interesting. You're talking about McKinsey. I also, when I was a management consultant with Hay Group UK, I was there for 7 years. And that I would also say, as you were talking, I was like, oh yeah, I remember that nobody would ever, like, you could come and go as you pleased because you had very clear work and very clear deliverables. So of course you would probably arrive at 8:30. But nobody was saying, oh, it was 9:10 this morning, or you left at 4. They didn't know whether you were going to catch a train and go up to Manchester that evening as well and work on the train. So it was just like a healthy amounts of work, accepting there may be sort of peaks and troughs. Maybe one night I work late, another night I finish with a client at 3 and I go straight home. And I've got something else the next day that starts, I have to get a train at 6 a.m. So it all kind of like evens out. Yeah. Rather than I am only seeing people in my team to be loyal and hardworking because, oh, that one emailed me on Saturday morning, or that one responded to my whatever at 10 p.m. on a Wednesday. Like, oh, they must really be committed. No. Are they doing the work? Maybe they just emailed you on Wednesday at 10 p.m. to look good. Do you think people that play that game? Of course they do.
Yeah, no. And I think, and we don't have time to discuss it today, but there are lots of people who, especially people of color or people from different countries, who feel that they have to do all of this extra stuff because that will, ensure that they keep their job or that they can get promoted, I want to work exactly, as hard as my leader because I want to show that I deserve this job and I'm qualified for this job and that, this is where I should be. Yeah. And, one of the healthiest things you can do as a leader is, and especially if you have a diverse team or anyone of any diversity on your team, is to, one, treat and assign the work the same. but also notice when and I'm not saying not everybody will, learn your bad habits of working all the time. But, those folks that, have, some form of diversity, a lot of them feel, I know as a Black woman, often felt I had to do 10,000 more things in order to get the recognition that I deserve.
Right.
And so sometimes when you can get a leader to connect with you, and Anne, who used to do this all the time, I'm noticing you are, or if I respond to something on the weekend, why are you working? Or if I, texted something, or, why are you texting me? I'm in the Hamptons, whatever the case may be, you need a leader to sort of push back, especially on those folks that feel that they are just grateful to have the opportunity and they want to prove themselves, and proving themselves means, in essence, working all the time.
Yeah.
So you as a leader can tap into that person and just sort of say, okay, why don't you be on vacation? Or why don't you take the weekend? Or, why don't you, do whatever, and I used to work on the weekends because she did that. I used to just feel like I just felt discretionary effort and energy that I wanted to bring to something just because she checked in with me that way.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
So just remember that leadership isn't about running yourself into the ground, folks. Showing up as your best self and encouraging your team to do the same, to take healthy breaks, to prioritize the most important things, to make sure that they have clarity, so they are working on the most important things. Doing that is healthy. And leaders who create healthy environments create healthier teams. And by the way, that healthier team goes to mental health and physical health and less anxiety and all the things. And so that's what you want to be promoting. And I just want to say this one last thing, and then we can close it out. Taking care of yourself is not selfish. I just want you to sit with that for a second. Taking care of yourself, leader, is not selfish. It's actually leadership in action. You are actually demonstrating to your team that being healthy matters. And that you value that. Okay.
And it then allows you to really care for your people. Because you are not depleted or exhausted or just absent or dying in a corner somewhere.
All right. So we'll close this out. We thank you so much. Just think this week, how can you start to model healthy leadership? And, hopefully we've given you some tips to consider and some things to think about. Just remember, creating a healthy, productive environment is not about being soft, and it's not about, being nice or kind. I mean, it is, but that's not the ingoing factor. Creating a healthy environment is about taking care of yourself so you can take care of your people. And so that you can message to them that that health, mental health, physical health, all the healths matter, and that you take that seriously. As usual, we want your comments on our topics. We want you to give us feedback. Please subscribe, share. You might know someone who isn't creating a healthy environment, or is working for somebody who isn't creating a healthy environment. Make sure to share these podcasts. And as usual, you can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Spotify, Apple, and Amazon. And we appreciate you, and keep leading with purpose. Anything you want to close out with?
Allison, I just want to add a little thing here. For folk who maybe are thinking about, hey, I want to try something different around modeling self-care, even sharing something like this podcast with your team might be an interesting starting point, and say, have a listen to these peeps. What do you reckon? This is what I want to try and do. Let's have a chat about this in our next team meeting or something. So, by all means, use these podcasts as talking points for one-to-ones or with your teams, or depending on your relationship with your manager, carefully, or maybe don't share podcasts with your manager. Say, have a look at this. This is what I'm trying. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Maybe you could do this too. So, All of the best. We are building a community of resilient, growth-minded leaders like you. Modeling your self-care is so important. We care for you as individuals, and also therefore what you will be able to do with your people. So
yes,
good luck.
Connect with us. Choices. Yes. Connect with us on LinkedIn. And if you need help in trying to figure out how to even do something like this, reach out to myself or Dean. Our information is in the details of this podcast. We thank you so much. Thanks,
Allison. Thanks.
Bye. Thank you, Dean.